a struggling mechanic, a laughingstock in his own home, makes one catastrophic mistake that costs more than anyone could imagine. His family thought his dreams were a pathetic joke. They wrote him off as a failure, a man stuck in the past. But they had no idea about the secret he'd been protecting for 20 years, a secret worth $221 million that would change everything. This is the story of a man who was counted out, an incredible journey that proved it's never too late to cross the finish line. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The wreck. The garage was Leo Braxton's sanctuary, a cathedral of grease and gasoline, where the air hummed with the ghost of horsepower and the scent of ambition. To anyone else, it was a cluttered, dusty testament to a life of manual labor. But to Leo, every oil stain on the concrete floor was a memory, every tool on the wall a trusted friend. The space was dominated by his magnum opus, a shape shrouded under a heavy, off-white canvas tarp that did little to hide the aggressive, predatory lines beneath. This project was a Sistine Chapel, a 20-year symphony of sweat, sacrifice, and a hope that everyone else had long since given up on. At 48, Leo's body was a road map of his trade. His hands, permanently etched with black lines of grime no industrial soap could scour away, were strong and capable, but they carried a slight, constant tremor now, a telltale sign of too many late nights and not enough sleep. His face, weathered and kind, was often lost in thought, a trait his family mistook for detachment, a simple-minded absorption in a world of pistons and gears they could not understand. The heavy silence of the garage was shattered by the squeal of the side door rolling open. His son, Jake, 17 and brimming with the cruel, unshakable certainty of youth, leaned against the doorframe, his phone glowing in his hand. "Dad, Mom says dinner's been on the table for 10 minutes. It's getting cold. Again." The derision in his voice was a familiar, practiced weapon. "Are you still out here messing with that thing?" He gestured vaguely at the tarp-covered monolith. Leo didn't look up from the fuel injector he was cleaning. "Almost done, Jake." "You're always almost done. It's a piece of junk. It's always been a piece of junk." Before Leo could form a response, his wife, Sarah, appeared behind Jake. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, a posture that had become her default over the past few years. Her love for Leo was a deep, steady river, but lately it felt like it was eroding its banks, worn down by a daily tide of financial anxiety and quiet disappointment. The mortgage was a month behind. The conversation about Jake's college fund was a circular argument that led nowhere, and here was her husband, in his greasy church, praying to a God that had never answered. "Leo, please," she said, her voice thin with exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. "Come inside. It's meatloaf. It's just a car. It's not going to magically fix everything." Leo finally set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag that was more oil than fabric. He looked at her, and for a moment, the profound weariness in his own eyes mirrored hers. "It's not just a car, Sarah," he murmured, the words sounding weak and hollow even to him. He walked over to the shape and, with a reverence that made Jake roll his eyes, pulled the tarp away. The light glinted off a sweeping curve of crimson carbon fiber. It wasn't a car. It was a sculpture of pure velocity, a relic from a bygone era of Formula One. A low-slung chassis, a stark, exposed engine bay waiting for a heart, and a cockpit so narrow it seemed to defy human entry. It was the 1998 Williams FW20 he'd once dreamed of driving, painstakingly restored bolt by bolt. To him, it was a masterpiece of engineering, a symbol of what could have been. To them, it was the world's most expensive lawn ornament, a pathetic monument to a racing dream that had crashed and burned long before this chassis ever would. "It looks like a big, red, expensive go-kart," Jake scoffed, earning a sharp but weak look from his mother that did little to hide her own silent agreement. The next day, the fragile piece of the garage was invaded by the real world. Mr. Thorne, a client with more money than patience, arrived early for his vintage Jaguar E-Type. The car, a $1 million masterpiece in British racing green, was supposed to be ready for a concours d'elegance. The shop was a cacophony of ringing phones, air tools, and Thorne's impatient tapping of his leather loafer. "Leo, His mind, still replaying the argument with Sarah from a night before, was distracted. He needed to move the Formula One chassis on its wheeled dolly to make space for the Jaguar's door to swing open. His foot caught on a loose air hose snaking across the floor. He stumbled, his grip on the dolly's handle faltering. Time dilated, stretching the moment into a horrifying, silent ballet of disaster. The dolly tilted. The 1,000-pound chassis, a thing of delicate beauty and immense mass, slid sideways. It seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before it came down with a sickening, explosive crunch directly onto the Jaguar's pristine front fender and headlight. The sound that followed was not of noise, but of its absolute absence. It was a vacuum of sound, filled only by the slow drip of brake fluid from a severed line. Then the world rushed back in. "You idiot!" Mr. Thorne's face purpled with apoplectic rage. He stormed over, pointing a trembling finger at the catastrophic damage. "You incompetent fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? This is a piece of history. It's irreplaceable." Leo could only stand there, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, staring at the tangled wreck of carbon fiber and chrome. His dream had literally crashed into his reality, and both lay in ruins. And then he saw Jake. His son was frozen in the open doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, having stopped by after school. He wasn't looking at the wrecked cars. He was looking at his father. His face wasn't angry. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated mortification. The look he gave Leo wasn't just disappointment. It was a devastating, silent pity. He didn't say a word. He just shook his head slowly, turned and walked away, leaving his father alone in the wreckage of his project, his profession, and whatever last shred of dignity he had left. That night, the silence at the dinner table was a physical, suffocating presence. The meatloaf sat uneaten, congealing on the plates. The life Leo had painstakingly built, already strained to its breaking point, had finally shattered. He had hit the wall at full speed. And this time, there was no walking away from the crash. The secret in the spare part. The drive home was a blur of shame and a deafening internal roar. Leo's knuckles were white on the steering wheel of his battered pickup truck, his mind replaying the horrific crunch of carbon fiber, and the purple rage on Mr. Thorne's face on an endless, torturous loop. He had been fired, of course. Not just let go, but publicly excoriated and escorted off the property by a man who promised to sue for damages that exceeded the value of Leo's entire life. The lead weight of failure sat heavy in his gut, a familiar tenant that had just signed a permanent lease. He pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, the sight of it now feeling like an accusation. The paint was peeling by the garage door. A shutter hung slightly crooked. Each flaw was a testament to his inadequacy. He braced himself for the hurricane. He expected Sarah's fury, her tears, a final, decisive slam of a door that had been creaking open for years. He rehearsed apologies in his head, each one sounding more hollow and pathetic than the last. He found her not in the kitchen, but in the living room, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the floral-patterned couch. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even angry. She was just staring at the coffee table, where a neat, terrifying stack of bills had been placed like a centerpiece. Her hands were folded in her lap, her posture rigid with quiet, terrifying despair. Thorne's lawyer called, she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion whatsoever. It was a tone one might use to describe the weather. A fact, a bleak, unchangeable fact. He's not suing. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Leo felt a flicker of insane hope, which she immediately extinguished. He said the cost of the repair is more than our house is worth. He said pursuing it would be pointless. He said, her voice finally cracked, just a hair. He said he pities us. The word landed not like a slap, but like a shard of ice directly in Leo's heart. Pity was worse than anger. Anger was hot. It was passion. It was engagement. Pity was cold, distant, and final. It was the emotional equivalent of being written off. Sarah, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. The words tumbled out, weak and useless. She held up a hand, stopping him. She still wouldn't look at him. Just don't, Leo. I can't hear it right now. I just can't. She took a slow, shaky breath. Just go to your garage. The dismissal was absolute. He had been banished to the scene of his crime. He was a ghost in his own home. Dejected, his shoulders slumped so low they ached, Leo obeyed. The garage felt different now. The sanctuary had become a tomb. The tools on the wall weren't trusted friends. They were silent witnesses to his humiliation. His eyes were drawn, inevitably, to the wrecked Formula One chassis. The impact had been vicious, spider-webbing the crimson carbon fiber of the nose cone and brutally crushing the side pod. It was a mortal wound to his 20-year dream, a monument to his failure, now doubly damned. A sudden, hot surge of grief and self-loathing overwhelmed him. This thing, this stupid, beautiful, impossible thing, had stolen his time, his money, and now his livelihood. It had cost him the respect of his son, and now, he feared, the love of his wife. In a blind rage, he grabbed a heavy sledgehammer from its rack. His muscles coiled, every ounce of frustration and shame channeling into the grip. He would destroy it. He would smash it into 1,000 pieces, and be done with it forever. He raised the hammer high above his head, his breath coming in ragged gasps, aiming for the heart of the cracked nose cone. But as he tensed to bring the weight down, a faint, unnatural glint caught his eye from within the newly created cavity of the wreck. It was a dull, metallic gray, a color that didn't belong with the carbon fiber and colored wiring looms. It was tucked deep inside a structural member, hidden away as if it were never meant to be found. He froze, the sledgehammer hovering in the air. His mechanic's curiosity, a reflex more ingrained than any emotion, overpowered his rage. He lowered the hammer, letting the head thud dully on the concrete floor. He fetched a high-powered flashlight and a pair of long, needle-nosed pliers from his bench. Kneeling, he shone the light into the dark opening. There, nestled within a specially crafted niche in the chassis tubing, was a sealed aluminum cylinder, about the size of a thick marker. It was weathered and scratched from 2 decades of vibration, but it was clearly a purpose-built container, welded shut with precision that spoke of intent. What in the world? His hands, which had been trembling with anger moments before, were now steady and sure, moving with the practiced grace of his trade. This was a puzzle. This was a problem he could solve. He carefully selected a small drill bit and clamped the cylinder in a vise. For the next hour, he worked with painstaking care, drilling out the welded seal, his world shrinking to the point of contact between metal and bit. The whine of the drill was the only sound in the tomb-like garage. Finally, the seal gave way. Using a pry tool, he carefully popped the end off the cylinder. Inside, protected by yellowing foam padding that had hardened with age, was a single, unassuming computer chip, its pins gleaming faintly. Nestled beside it was a small, tightly folded slip of rice paper. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. He unfolded the paper with delicate fingers. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and hauntingly familiar. It was a handwriting of Arthur Finch, his old mentor, the brilliant, eccentric engineering genius who had designed this very chassis. Leo had been his chosen protege, his future star driver, before the team's funding vanished in a cloud of corporate betrayal, and the entire project was scrapped and sold for parts. The note was short, cryptic, and felt like a message from the grave. Leo, if you're reading this, the world wasn't ready. This is the key. The future is in the code. Protect it. Yeah. The key to what? Leo stared at the chip, then back at the note. This was no ordinary spare part. This was something Arthur had hidden at great risk. Something he deemed so valuable it needed to be physically secreted away inside the bones of his greatest creation. But what could a computer chip from the late 90s possibly be worth? The door to the garage creaked open. It was Jake, his expression still a hard mask of resentment. Mom's go to bed. She says she doesn't want to talk. Probably ever again. His eyes, full of teenage scorn, fell on the strange cylinder in Leo's hand and the tiny chip sitting on the workbench. What's that? Another useless piece of junk you pulled out of the wreck. For the first time that day, Leo didn't feel shame or defeat under his son's gaze. He felt a spark. A tiny, terrifying, and exhilarating spark of something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Purpose. I don't know, Jake, Leo said, his voice low and steady, his eyes fixed on the tiny piece of silicon. But I'm going to find out. the ghost in the machine. The spark of hope that flared in the garage was immediately doused by the cold, hard water reality. Leo Braxton was a hardware man. His language was torque specs and tolerances, the music of a well-tuned engine and the feel of a perfectly balanced drive shaft. He could diagnose a misfire by sound alone and rebuild a transmission blindfolded. But the object sitting on his workbench, gleaming under the fluorescent light, spoke a language he didn't understand. Code. Algorithms. It was a tiny silent sphinx, and its riddle felt like it could save or destroy them. The chip, with its rows of delicate, archaic pins, was a relic. It was a physical artifact in a world that had long since gone wireless and cloud-based. The note from Arthur Finch, "The future is in the code," felt like a cruel joke. How could the future be locked inside a piece of tech that was obsolete before Jake was even born? Despair began to creep back in, its cold fingers reaching for him. He needed an expert, but experts demanded fees that were a fantasy. Trust was an even scarcer commodity. His eyes drifted from the chip to the closed door of the house, behind which his son was undoubtedly lost in the glow of his powerful gaming computer. Jake's hacking phase had been a nightmare of parental control software and a worried visit from the school principal, but it had also revealed a natural, intuitive aptitude for machines of a different kind. It was a Hail Mary, a desperate, laughable long shot, but it was the only shot he had. It was also a chance, a fragile one, to build a bridge over the chasm that had opened between them. He found Jake in his room, the air thick with the synthetic sounds of digital gunfire and explosions from his headset. The glow of the monitor painted his face in shifting shades of blue and red, his expression a familiar mask of scornful concentration. "What do you want?" Jake asked, not bothering to pause the game or look away from the screen. His voice was a flat line of annoyance. "I need your help," Leo said. The words felt foreign and rusty on his tongue. He couldn't remember the last time he'd asked his son for anything beyond taking out the trash. Jake snorted, his character on screen dying in a spectacular burst of pixels. "To do what? Crash another car? Pretty sure you got that covered." Leo didn't flinch. He held up the chip, pinched carefully between his thick, callous fingers. "To find out what's on this." The bizarre request was so far outside the realm of their usual strained interactions that it actually gave Jake pause. He finally turned, his curiosity, ever the enemy of his disdain, piqued. "What is it?" I think it's something important. Something my old boss, Arthur Finch, hid inside the car a long time ago." With a theatrical sigh meant to convey his immense inconvenience, Jake took the chip. He turned it over in his hands, his touch noticeably more delicate than his father's. "This is ancient, like pre-2000s ancient. The interface is totally legacy. My rig can't read this." He was about to toss it back, a dismissal ready on his lips, but he hesitated. He saw something in his father's face he hadn't seen in years. Not desperation, but a raw, earnest need. It was unnerving. "There's a guy," Jake said, relenting against his better judgment. "A friend of a friend from a coding forum. Malik. He's a total gearhead and runs a niche tech repair shop out his dorm. He collects vintage hardware. He might have an adapter that can read this dinosaur, but it's going to cost you." The cost was Leo's most prized possession. His vintage snap-on torque wrench, a beautiful, perfectly balanced tool he'd saved up for 6 months to buy when he first started as a mechanic. It was a cornerstone of his toolbox, an extension of his own arm. Without a word, Leo went to his chest, retrieved the gleaming tool, and handed it over. The look on Jake's face was worth more than the wrench itself. It was a first real crack in the boy's armor. He's sacrificing his best tool for this? Malik, a sharp-eyed college student with a passion for tech history, did indeed have the adapter. The trade was made in the cramped, chip-littered chaos of his dorm room. Back in Jake's bedroom, the air now thick with a new kind of tension, they connected the ancient chip to the sleek modern computer via the bizarre adapter. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up command prompts and diagnostic tools. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. Files, hundreds of them, began to populate a window. Complex schematics, intricate fluid dynamics models, and reams of dense, incomprehensible code scrolled past. It's just a bunch of old blueprints and gibberish, Jake said, his initial excitement deflating into disappointment. He leaned back in his chair. This is what you traded your wrench for? A digital library of outdated car parts. But Leo's eyes, sharpened by decades of reading engineering drawings, were glued to the screen. He saw past the raw data. He saw the genius in the designs, the elegance of the solutions. Then he pointed a grimy finger at a single, unassuming folder nestled among the others. It was labeled simply, Ether. Open that one. Jake double-clicked. Instead of a list of files, a sleek, minimalist interface loaded. It was shockingly advanced, clean, and intuitive in a way that fell out of place among the other archaic data. A login screen materialized with a single, blinking prompt. Voice identification required. Whoa, Jake whispered, his text sense tingling. It wants you to talk to it. It's got a voice activation protocol. From the 90s. That's insane. Leo, his mouth suddenly dry, leaned close to the microphone on Jake's desk. He remembered Arthur's eccentricities, his love for theatricality. He spoke the words he'd heard his mentor say 1,000 times in the workshop. Ignition sequence start. The response was instantaneous. A soft, synthesized voice, smooth and devoid of the robotic choppiness typical of the era, emanated from the speakers. It was calm, clear, and impossibly intelligent. Hello, Leo. It has been 7,412 days. I have been waiting. Father and son stared at each other, their jaws slack with disbelief. The AI, because that's clearly what it was, continued, its tone almost conversational. I am the Ether Project, an adaptive real-time telemetry and vehicle dynamic system. My purpose is to win races. All systems are nominal. Shall we begin? It was a ghost, a digital ghost from another time, and it knew Leo's name. The implications were staggering, a tidal wave of questions about what this technology truly was and why Arthur Finch had hidden it. It was in that moment of stunned revelation that the first email arrived. It popped up as a priority alert on Jake's screen, stark and invasive against the Ether interface. The sender was a scrambled string of characters. The subject line was cold and direct. You have something that doesn't belong to you. The message in the body was brief and terrifyingly final. The Ether asset is proprietary corporate property. Cease and desist all access immediately. You will be contacted. Non-compliance will result in severe consequences. The thrill of discovery evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp fear that sucked the air from the room. The sanctuary of Jake's bedroom, with its movie posters and cluttered desk, suddenly felt terribly exposed, the windows like eyes watching them. Their mystery hadn't just been solved. It had attracted a predator. The secret was out, and it was far more valuable and far more dangerous than either of them could have ever imagined. A threat from the past. The cheerful, synthetic voice of the Ether AI seemed to curdle in the air, its promise of victory now sounding like a death knell. The email on Jake's screen wasn't just text. It was a breach. It was a statement of ownership and a threat, all in one neatly typed package. The four walls of Jake's bedroom, once a haven of teenage rebellion and video game glory, now felt as flimsy as paper, pressing it on them with new, suffocating pressure. What did you do? Jake hissed, his voice a tight wire of panic. He slammed the laptop shut with a definitive crack, as if he could physically trap the threat inside. His eyes, wide with a fear that instantly vaporized his usual teenage cynicism, locked onto his father. Who did you steal this from? These people, they found us in my room. I didn't steal it. Leo's own heart was a frantic drum against his ribs, but his voice was low, forcing a calm he didn't feel. The mechanic in him was assessing the damage, looking for the source of the leak. Arthur gave it to me. He hid it. He must have known someone would come for it. They must have some kind of tracer, an alarm that went off when we activated it. The theory was cold comfort. The reality was that a faceless, powerful entity now knew they existed and where they lived. The digital world, Jake's domain, had suddenly become a hostile landscape. The door to the bedroom flew open. Sarah stood there, her face a mask of pale terror. Her hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. Leo Braxton, what in God's name is going on? Her voice was a strained whisper, frayed with fear. There are two men in suits at the front door. They're asking for you. They're not from the bank, Leo. They're different. The way she said different conveyed everything. A cold, professional menace that had nothing to do with repossession notices and everything to do with something far darker. Leo moved to the window, carefully peeling back the edge of the blinds just enough to see out. Two men stood beside a black sedan, so polished it looked like a hole cut into the daylight. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits and sunglasses that hid their eyes even in the shade of the oak tree. They weren't talking. They weren't fidgeting. They simply stood impassive and patient, like statues of impending doom. These weren't lawyers or process servers. They were collectors, corporate enforcers. "Don't answer it," Jake whispered from behind him, his voice trembling. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. This was no longer about his father's foolish dream or his own embarrassment. This was a clear and present danger to their home, to his mother. A new, protective instinct, raw and fierce, surged in him, momentarily overshadowing years of resentment. They stood frozen in the quiet bedroom, listening to the silence. After a full minute, they heard the soft crunch of gravel as the men returned to their car. The low purr of the engine started, and the black sedan slid away from the curb and disappeared down the street. The relief was immediate but short-lived. It was a retreat, not a surrender. When he was sure they were gone, Leo crept to the front door and found the only thing they'd left behind. A single, heavy-stock business card slipped into the door jamb. It was blank except for a name, Alistair Croft, and a phone number with a Swiss international prefix. The company listed below was simply Omnicorp International, Zurich. Back in Jake's room, a frantic online search confirmed their worst fears. Omnicorp International was a leviathan, a global technology and aerospace conglomerate with tendrils in everything from defense contracts to satellite networks. A deeper dive into corporate history revealed a chilling fact. Decades ago, they had acquired all the assets of the defunct Finch racing team. Legally, on paper, every single bolt, every schematic, every line of code from Arthur Finch's workshop belonged to them. Leo wasn't just a trespasser. He was a thief in the eyes of a multi-billion-dollar corporation with battalions of lawyers and, apparently, men in black sedans. The hope that had flickered so brightly with the AI's activation was now completely extinguished, replaced by a cold, paralyzing anxiety. They were trapped. They possessed something of immense value they couldn't use, and a rightful owner who clearly didn't bother with polite letters before sending representatives to your doorstep. Later that evening, the three of them huddled in the living room like survivors after a storm. The television was on, a mindless drone of noise to fill the terrifying silence. A news segment came on, previewing the upcoming Miami Grand Prix. The glossy footage of cutting-edge cars screaming around a track felt like it was from another universe. The anchor's voice was overly dramatic as he focused on the reigning world champion team, Titan Racing, and their very public struggles. And without a solution to their chronic downforce issue in the slow-speed corners, particularly in the tricky chicane of Sectors 2 and 3, Titan season looks to be another monumental disappointment despite their record-breaking budget and superstar driver, Felix Croft. Leo's head, which had been in his hands, snapped up. He watched as the onboard camera showed the multi-million-dollar car wobbling, twitching, and fighting for grip through a tight hairpin. The driver's hands were a frantic blur on the wheel, correcting a vicious snap of oversteer. It was a problem of instability, a complex harmonic oscillation that happened too fast for a human driver to consistently correct. His mechanic's brain, honed over 30 years of diagnosing problems invisible to the untrained eye, analyzed the issue instantly. It wasn't just one thing. It was a cascade of aerodynamic and mechanical events that needed to be predicted and counteracted not just lap by lap, but millisecond by millisecond. My purpose is to win races. An adaptive real-time telemetry and vehicle dynamics system. The two thoughts collided in his mind with the force of a physical blow. The idea that form was so audacious, so utterly insane, that it bypassed fear and landed directly in the realm of desperate brilliance. It was a way out. It was a way to fight back. It was the only card they had to play. He turned to his family, his eyes blazing with fire they hadn't seen in 20 years. The defeated, hunched posture was gone, replaced by a straight-back certainty. They want it back? Fine, he said, his voice low and charged with intensity. But we're not just going to hand it over. Sarah stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Leo, what are you talking about? They're a corporation. They'll crush us. We're going to use it, he declared. We're going to take this to them. He pointed at the TV, where the Titan racing car was now sitting dejectedly in its garage. We're going to solve their problem. Jake stared at him, his face a mixture of horror and disbelief. You're insane. You are actually insane. You're going to walk up to a $1 billion F1 team and tell them you have a magic computer chip from the last century that can fix their car? They'll laugh you out of the paddock, and then those guys in the black suits will arrest you. Maybe, Leo said, a grim, determined smile touching his lips for the first time in days. But they won't be laughing when they see what it can do. We have 3 days until the Grand Prix. Start packing. We're going to Miami. It was ludicrous. It was a fantasy. It was a plan with a million ways to fail catastrophically. But for the first time in a long time, the Braxton family had a plan. And for the first time ever, they were going to execute it together. Checkered flag. The Miami Grand Prix paddock was a fortress of exclusivity, a shimmering village of wealth and technology, where access was a currency more valuable than cash. Leo, in his faded jeans and a polo shirt worn thin with age, was a ghost at this particular feast. Jake, trying to talk their way past security with a torrent of tech jargon, was swiftly and politely shut down by a guard with the bored eyes of a man who heard 100 excuses a day. They were being gently but firmly escorted towards the exit, their insane mission dying before it had even begun. It was in that moment of final defeat that Leo saw it. The Titan Racing Hauler, its logo a stark slash of black and silver. The car itself was surrounded by a hive of frantic engineers, their body language screaming frustration. The chief mechanic, a burly Italian man named Giorgio with a permanent scowl, was barking orders. Something in Leo snapped. He broke away from the security guard, his legs carrying him with a purpose he hadn't felt in decades. He dodged past a group of journalists and planted himself at the edge of the team's sanctum, pointing a callous finger at the car's complex bargeboard area. It's the vortex shedding off the rear edge of the floor, he yelled, his voice cutting to the paddock din. It's causing a harmonic shake that's killing your downforce. You need to change the stiffness of the mounting, not keep messing with the wing angle. Giorgio turned, his face a thundercloud ready to unleash fury. But the fury died before it was born. The problem Leo described wasn't a guess. It was hyperspecific, the exact, maddening issue that had consumed them for weeks. It was a kind of diagnosis that came from decades of instinct, not a textbook. Who are you? Giorgio asked, his anger replaced by intense, bewildered curiosity. My name is Leo Braxton, and I have the solution. Give me 10 minutes with your sim team. If I'm wrong, I'll leave and you can have me arrested. Desperation makes for strange allies. Giorgio, against every protocol, nodded. In the cool, dark cave of the team simulator truck, Leo handed the chip to a deeply skeptical engineer. Jake, his hands shaking, helped interface the ancient hardware with the team's multi-million-dollar system. The Ether AI came online. System linked, analyzing telemetry. The team watched, first with boredom, then with creeping disbelief, as the AI processed gigabytes of data from the car's practice sessions in a matter of seconds. Asterisk, running predictive simulation. Proposed solution. Modify rear suspension towing curve by 0.15 degrees per 10 kilometers per hour of lateral load, compensating with differential torque vectoring. Asterisk, it was a solution no human would have ever conceived, a counterintuitive dance of parameters. They input the data into the sim. The virtual car, which had been a twitchy, unpredictable beast, stabilized instantly. The lap time on the screen dropped by a staggering 2 seconds. Pandemonium ensued. The team principal was called. Offers were made on the spot, obscene sums of money to buy the technology outright. But Leo refused, his newfound strength unwavering. I'm not selling. I'm partnering. My son, and I will oversee its implementation. Today, the race was a blur of noise and adrenaline. Leo and Jake, now wearing official Titan racing gear, stood on the pit wall, headsets clamped to their ears. The car, guided by the Aether AI's real-time adjustments, was a revelation. It sliced through the field from its lowly grid position, its handling in the slow corners a thing of balletic beauty. The other teams were baffled. Titan Racing was ecstatic. On the final lap, the car took the checker flag in a stunning, impossible first place. In the chaotic, champagne-soaked victory lane, a reporter shoved a microphone in Leo's face. Leo Braxton, a stunning result. An unknown mechanic and your son provide the secret weapon. Where did this technology come from? Before Leo could answer, Alistair Croft and his Omnicorp lawyers materialized like vultures, their faces tight with fury. This technology is stolen property. This victory is illegitimate. We demand its immediate seizure. It was the moment of reckoning. But Leo was ready. He nodded to Jake, who pulled out his phone and played a recorded message. The synthesized voice of the Aether AI, clear and calm. Designation, Aether Project. Designer, Arthur Finch. Intellectual property assignment. Bequeathed solely to protege Leo Braxton upon my death. Legal documentation. Filed with Finch Estate Executor, dated 1999. Arthur Finch had covered his tracks. The will, recently and frantically unearthed by a lawyer Leo had contacted, was ironclad. Omnicorp owned the physical chassis. They did not own the mind inside it. Their case evaporated live on global television. Later, the offer from Titan Racing was formal and breathtaking. $221 million for exclusive licensing and for Leo to lead their new advanced R&D division, with Jake heading up the software integration team. That night, in a luxury hotel suite overlooking the ocean, the Braxton family was silent, the magnitude of the day settling over them. Sarah finally spoke, tears tracing clean paths through her makeup. All those years in the garage, you weren't just living in the past, were you? You were protecting our future. Leo took her hand. I just never knew how to tell you I was guarding a ghost. He looked at Jake, and I couldn't have done it without my crew chief. Jake didn't scoff. He didn't roll his eyes. He looked at his father, his hero, and simply said, that was the craziest, coolest thing I've ever seen, Dad. The family that had been fractured by silence was now welded together, stronger than carbon fiber, by a shared secret and an unbelievable victory. Leo Braxton hadn't just won a race. He'd won back his family, finally finishing the race that had gotten away and proving the greatest victories are about who crosses the finish line with you. Did this story of redemption and family resilience inspire you? If you believe in second chances and the power of never giving up, show us by hitting that like button. What would you have done in Leo's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more incredible stories of everyday people overcoming impossible odds, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.